They sowed fear and panic. Their names were known across the nation and their crimes shocked the world. But each of them shared one common, inevitable finale. What happened behind the scenes of justice the moment the clock started their final countdown? The last meal, the final words, the last shred of hope, or its utter absence? In this video, we will meticulously reconstruct the final 24 hours of the most infamous serial killers in history. Bundy shocked everyone the day before his execution by agreeing to a final interview with one person, Dr. James Dobson. Dobson was an evangelical campaigner and psychologist who was granted an audience with the serial killer. The 45-minute interview was also taped with Bundy's permission on the condition that the entire conversation would be aired unedited. It was the moment every detective, judge, juror, and victim's family had been waiting for. Bundy finally admitted his guilt. He also blamed his sadistic crimes on pornography. Bundy said, "My experience with pornography that deals on a violent level with sexuality is that once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction, like other kinds of addiction, I would keep looking for more potent, more explicit, more graphic kinds of materials." Adding, like an addiction, you keep craving something which is harder, something which gives you a greater sense of excitement, until you reach the point where the pornography only goes so far. Although many believe that Bundy was once again playing to his audience, Dr. Dobson was vehemently anti-pornography and had campaigned against its public consumption. Bundy was telling him exactly what he wanted to hear. Bundy was due to make a final phone call before his execution to his wife, Carol Ann Boone. She had refused to speak to him after hearing his confession. Until that point, Boone believed her husband was innocent and her eldest son, Jamie, had begged Bundy not to spare his mother the public humiliation. Boone met Bundy in 1974 when they were both working in the Department of Emergency Services in Olympia, Washington. During Bundy's murder trials, the pair renewed their friendship, and eventually, this became a romance. Bundy even declared in the courtroom themselves married in front of a judge. In 1982, their daughter Rose Bundy was born. It is still unknown how they managed to conceive a child on death row, with many speculating the guards were paid to turn a blind eye. The day before Bundy's execution, his defense team claimed that the erratic outbursts in the courtroom during his trial for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach proved he was mentally incompetent. If they could prove via a psychological assessment that Bundy had been unfit to stand trial, he would be granted a stay of execution. 3 judges of the United States Court of Appeals had agreed there was insufficient time before the scheduled 7 a.m. execution to assess the appeal. It was then put to a vote, but the appeal was unsuccessful. The total cost of Bundy's numerous murder trials, prison escapes, and his 13 years on death row cost taxpayers an estimated $5 million. Governor Bob Martinez stated, "Justice has been on hold for a decade, and it's about time Ted Bundy paid for his crimes." In his previous interviews on death row that were conducted by Stephen Michaud and Hugh Ainsworth for the book Ted Bundy, Conversations with a Killer, Bundy said he did not feel guilt for his crimes. Bundy told the writers, "Guilt. It's this mechanism we use to control people. It's an illusion. It's a kind of social control mechanism, and it's very unhealthy. It does terrible things to the body. I don't feel guilty for anything. I feel sorry for people who feel guilt." Bundy did not request a special meal before his execution. He instead received a standard meal of medium rare steak, eggs, toast with butter, coffee, juice, and hash browns. The night before the execution, he spoke twice on the phone with his mother, Louise Bundy. Louise did not attend her son's execution, so journalists traveled to her home in Tacoma, Washington. She told them it's a media circus, and we didn't feel the agony we would go through by going down there would compensate for a few minutes talking to Ted through the glass, and he also felt that way too. Louise also believed her son should not have been executed. I think it is barbaric. What good does it do? It's legalized murder is all. It's not a deterrent. They've been killing people for thousands of years, and what good has it done? She said. Her final words to Bundy on the phone were, "You'll always be my precious son." On January 24, 1989, Bundy had wept and prayed all night in his prison cell. The day of his execution had finally arrived. A last thick strap was pulled across Bundy's mouth and chin. The metal skull cap was bolted in place, its heavy black veil falling in front of the condemned man's face. An anonymous executioner pushed the button. 2,000 volts surged through the wires. Bundy's body tensed and his hands tightened into a clench. A tiny puff of smoke lifted from his right leg. A minute later, the machine was turned off and Bundy went limp. A paramedic opened the blue shirt and listened for a heartbeat. A second doctor aimed a light into his eyes. At 7:16 a.m., Theodore Robert Bundy, one of the most active killers of all time, was pronounced dead. A crowd of 2,000 spectators gathered outside Florida State Prison to celebrate the execution of the notorious serial killer. Vendors sold T-shirts that read, "Burn Bundy Burn," and "Toast Ted." One member in the crowd held a painted sign that said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. Good morning, Ted. We're going to kill you." Albert Fish, born Hamilton Howard Fish on the 19th of May, 1870 in Washington, D.C., is remembered as one of the most infamous and disturbing figures in American criminal history. While his crimes were heinous, understanding the circumstances of his life and the broader social context can shed light on the development of such a disturbed individual. This would in no way be an attempt to excuse his behavior, merely a way of possibly understanding the why. Albert Hamilton Fish was tried for the premeditated murder of Grace Budd. The trial began on Monday, March 11, 1935, in White Plains, New York. The court consisted of Judge Frederick P. Close, defense attorney James Dempsey, and the chief assistant district attorney Elbert F. Gallagher as the prosecutor. The trial lasted 10 days. Several psychologists studied Fish's sexual fetishes, including coprophilia, urophilia, pedophilia, and masochism. However, they could not reach a consensus on the question, is Fish insane? The defense's lead expert, psychiatrist Frederick Wortham, who specialized in child development and conducted evaluations for New York criminal courts, stated that Fish was insane. The court found Fish guilty of murder and sane. The judge sentenced him to death by electrocution. After the sentence was announced, Fish confessed to causing the death of another child, 8-year-old Francis H. McDonnell, on Staten Island on July 15, 1924. His mother had seen an old man walking around. He left without saying anything. The next day, the old man was seen again, watching McDonnell play with his friends. The child was found in a thicket not far from where, at noon, a neighbor had seen an old man with a boy. In March 1935, Albert Hamilton Fish was transferred to the death row cell at Sing Sing Prison. He stated that execution by electricity would be the supreme thrill of his life. On January 16, 1936, he was executed in the electric chair. At 11:06 p.m., he entered the execution chamber, and 3 minutes later his death was announced. He was buried in the Sing Sing prison cemetery. Just before the switch was thrown to activate the electric chair, Fish uttered his last words, "I don't even know why I am here." One of the witnesses to the execution later reported that Fish died only after 2 jolts of current. Throughout his life, Fish had inserted needles into his body, and because of this, a short circuit occurred. Jeffrey Dahmer's death bore an eerie similarity to the first murder he committed. Fellow inmate Christopher Scarver beat Dahmer, and a second inmate, Jesse Anderson, to death at Columbia Correctional Institution. Scarver, who is serving a life sentence for murder, told the New York Post in 2015 that Dahmer would sculpt human limbs from food and use ketchup for blood, unsettling other prisoners. Scarver kept his distance from Dahmer, who typically had a guard with him at all times because of his conflicts with other inmates. On November 28, 1994, Scarver, Anderson, and Dahmer were left unattended and unshackled to clean the gym bathroom. While Scarver was filling his mop and bucket, one of the men poked him in the back, but he didn't know who it was. I turned around, and Dahmer and Jesse were kind of laughing under their breath, Scarver recalled. I looked right into their eyes, and I couldn't tell which had done it. The men then split up, and Scarver, who had reportedly kept a newspaper clipping about Dahmer's crimes in his pocket, grabbed a 20-inch, 5-pound metal bar from the gym. Scarver followed Dahmer into a staff locker room and confronted him about the crimes outlined in the newspaper clipping. I asked him if he did those things because I was fiercely disgusted, Scarver told the New York Post, adding that Dahmer was shocked. He described what happened next. He started looking for the door pretty quick. I blocked him. He ended up dead. I put his head down. Scarver said he then quickly went to another locker room where Anderson was working and did the same to him. Guards found Dahmer on the bathroom floor with severe head wounds from being hit with the bar and from his head being slammed into the wall. He was hospitalized and pronounced dead an hour later. Scarver committed both murders within about 20 minutes. As for why he did it, Scarver said his motivation went beyond Dahmer's behavior behind bars. He crossed the line with some people, prisoners, prison staff, Scarver claimed. Dahmer's last words aren't publicly known. At his sentencing, he expressed remorse for his crimes and said he took full responsibility for the rapes and murders of his victims. I know society will never be able to forgive me. I know the families of the victims will never be able to forgive me for what I have done. He also addressed the multitude of statements from the families and loved ones of his victims. I feel so bad for what I did to those poor families, and I understand their rightful hate, Dahmer said. I have seen their tears, and if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it. Dahmer's murders traumatized the families of his victims and many others in the Milwaukee community, but the public reaction to Dahmer's death was divisive. While many were happy to know that Dahmer's reign of terror came to a definitive end, others were upset that he wasn't alive to suffer in prison for the atrocities he'd committed. Milwaukee County District Attorney E. Michael McCann told the New York Times after Dahmer's death, "This is the last sad chapter in a very sad life. Tragically, his parents will have to experience the same loss the families of his victims have experienced." Regarding Scarver, he added, "I hope there will be no economic returns or celebration as a folk hero for the man that killed Jeffrey Dahmer." Dahmer's own parents were even split in their response to his death. According to the Washington Post, Dahmer's mother, Joyce, wanted to preserve her son's brain for scientific studies into his behavior, while his father, Lionel, wanted it cremated with the rest of his body. In the end, both Dahmer's body and his brain were cremated, per the Los Angeles Times. John Wayne Gacy was pronounced dead at 12:58 a.m., said Howard Peters III, the corrections director at Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Ill, on May 10, 1994. After spending 14 years in prison, the man responsible for the deaths of 33 young men and boys was finally executed. Outside of the prison, a crowd gathered to cheer and protest his death. If anyone was looking for regret or contrition during Gacy's final moments, they wouldn't find it. John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. That was also the same day serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was baptized in the Wisconsin prison, where he was serving 15 consecutive life sentences. While strapped to the gurney that would ultimately be the last thing he felt before dying, Gacy was asked if he had anything to say. "Kiss my A," he said. Gacy's execution didn't go smoothly. The Chicago Tribune reported that the second of 3 drugs used to kill John Wayne Gacy early Tuesday briefly stopped flowing. This was partially due to the fact that the state prison official administering the drugs violated a basic law of chemistry. His execution was delayed by 10 minutes while prison officials changed Gacy's plastic tubing in an intravenous line feeding the chemicals into Gacy's right arm. According to a March 1986 piece in the Washington Post, Gacy somehow let one person escape from his deadly grasp. Jeffrey Rignall was lured into Gacy's car, which is the last thing he remembered before waking up in Gacy's home. He had been stripped and was restrained in a kind of pillory device. The incident occurred 9 years prior to the interview in March 1978, when then 26-year-old Rignall was walking to a gay bar. When Rignall woke up, Gacy was fixing himself a drink behind a bar. "There is a gun behind the bar, and I'd just as soon kill you as look at you," Gacy told Rignall. Once upon a time, a 900 number was something a person or company could use to generate income. The individual calling the 900 number was charged for it, usually per minute. While in prison, Gacy set up his own 900 number, per the Chicago Tribune. According to lawyers familiar with his phone-in stunt as well as sources in the underground comic community, Gacy has taped and sent to a Florida firm a 900 number message of up to 11 minutes, said the outlet. In the message, Gacy maintains his innocence in a rather incoherent fashion. He's babbling while making very little sense. One source said it sounded as if Gacy had lost any sense of reality. Some believe Gacy was doing this in order to establish that he was mentally unfit for execution. It obviously didn't work. While this is vaguely amusing, decades after he was caught, the families of his victims eagerly awaited his death. Ramirez died while awaiting execution for a series of horrific crimes he committed in California between 1984 and 1985. Initially, California corrections officials stated that Ramirez had died of natural causes, as reported by the Los Angeles Times. However, a coroner's report released 10 days after his death stated that he died from complications of blood cancer. Ramirez had B-cell lymphoma, a common form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It is unclear when Ramirez was diagnosed with cancer or whether he received treatment. Additionally, at the time of his death, Ramirez had other serious medical conditions, including chronic substance dependence and chronic hepatitis C viral infection. The drug abuse began before Ramirez was incarcerated, more than 2 decades prior, and was likely the cause of his hepatitis C infection, an assistant chief coroner for Marin County told USA Today. He more than likely had been battling that for many years, the coroner said about Ramirez's hepatitis C. That disease kills the liver. Shortly after his capture and arrest, Ramirez's girlfriend, named Donna Myers, confirmed that he had started using cocaine a year earlier, dissolving it in water and injecting it intravenously. He had cuts, track marks on his left arm, Myers told People magazine about Ramirez's drug abuse. One time he broke a needle off in his arm. He was so strung out on coke, he was just going crazy. Although Ramirez's final words before death are unknown, his statements during sentencing made it clear that he did not fear death. When jurors handed him a death sentence on 19 separate counts in October 1989, Ramirez remained unfazed. Big deal, he told reporters, according to the Los Angeles Times. Death always comes with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland. A month later, in November 1989, during his sentencing, Ramirez delivered a chilling monologue to a packed courtroom that included his family members, survivors of his attacks, and relatives of those he had killed. You don't understand me. You are not expected to. You are not capable of it. I am beyond your comprehension, Ramirez said. He continued, I am beyond good and evil. I will be avenged. Lucifer dwells within us all. That is all.